Good morning, students. I, Sadaf Khan from the Millennium School, South City, welcome you to this session of chemistry. Students, from the past 2 or 3 sessions, I have been discussing the Bohr's atomic model with you. We have listed the various postulates and I have explained you the different postulates. And we've also gone into the operational or the mechanistic details of the model, where we derived different formulae for the radius, velocity, total energy, and wavelength, and calculated also. Now, continuing with that only, I would be discussing in this lecture the limitations or the failures of the Bohr's model. But before that, I introduce you to a topic, that is de Broglie hypothesis, which after explaining which I will come to the limitations of the Bohr's model. Now, de Broglie, it is pronounced as de Broglie. So, de Broglie was a scientist and he just put up a question whether the particles, just like electromagnetic radiations, can exhibit particles like electrons, just like electromagnetic radiation can exhibit dual nature. That is, whether they can behave both like particles and waves. We know that electrons are particles, they are microscopic particles, but can these particles behave like waves? To answer these questions, first he put forward a hypothesis, that is, he assumed, and this hypothesis was put forward in the form of the equation known as the de Broglie's equation, through which we can calculate this wavelength, which is known as the de Broglie's wavelength. So, what is the de Broglie's equation? That is, lambda wavelength, de Broglie's wavelength, is equal to h upon p. H is the Planck's constant, p is the momentum of the moving particle or the electron. P is equal to mv, we all know, so we can also write the equation as lambda is equal to h upon mv, where m is the mass and v is the velocity of the electron. This equation is known as the de Broglie's equation, and from this equation we can calculate the de Broglie's wavelength. Now, having put this hypothesis, then there were various others who wanted to test this hypothesis, and through very sophisticated and careful experimentation, it was very, very well put forward that electrons can exhibit the wave characters. The electrons can behave like waves because they exhibited very, very clearly the phenomenon of diffraction and interference. So when the diffraction and the interference of the electrons were carefully recorded, it was confirmed that electrons can behave both like particle and like wave, and hence it can be said that radiation, that is electromagnetic radiation, and matter both have dual nature. So this was the hypothesis that was proposed by de Broglie, and it was proved by experimentation that electrons have dual nature. Now, this talking about the de Broglie wavelength is, do all objects around us, the moving cars, the bicycles, a cricket ball, anything around us, do all these objects are emitting these wavelengths? Do all objects emit these discrete wavelengths? This question can be answered by taking a very simple example of calculating the wavelength, that is lambda equals to h upon mv, for an electron and for a tennis ball. Why I am taking these two examples? An electron is a microscopic particle, and for any tennis ball is a macroscopic particle. Microscopic particle, it is a macroscopic object. That is the difference in their sizes. We know the mass of the electron, the velocity given, and the Planck's constant. The mass of the tennis ball given as 0.1 kgs or 100 grams, and the velocity as 20 meters per second. If we substitute these values separately in this formula, that is h upon mv, then we can calculate the wavelength for electron as 725 nanometers, and we can solve the wavelength for the tennis ball as 3.3 into 10 to the power minus 25 nanometers. Okay, this is nanometers. So now, as you can compare the two values, you will see, when you compare these two values, you can see that this value is very, very small as compared to this value. In fact, this wavelength that is emitted by an electron, that is 725 nanometers, is a detectable and a measurable quantity which can be observed very, very easily. It can be observed, detected, and measured easily. But this being extremely small, minus 25 nanometers, extremely small, goes undetected. which means that the hypothesis, that is the de Broglie's equation or the de Broglie's hypothesis, is applicable only to microscopic particles like electrons and not to macroscopic objects around us like tennis ball. So this hypothesis, please remember, is applicable only to microscopic particles and not to macroscopic objects. Now, having explained this, that electrons have dual nature and they emit radiations just like waves, we come to the limitations and failures of the Bohr's theory. And the first and the important failure which Bohr encountered in proposing his theory or in proving his theory was that Bohr's atomic theory is valid only for single electron species. By single electron species, I mean a hydrogen atom which has only one electron, a lithium ion Li+, which has only one electron. So it is valid for only single electron species. It could not explain the atomic spectrum of two or multi-electron species. Also, another important failure was that it could not explain the splitting of spectral lines. Now, what is meant by splitting of spectral lines? Spectral lines, I have already told you when I was explaining you the emission and the absorption spectra, that the discrete lines or the wavelengths that are observed in a spectral pattern is known as the spectral lines. Now, each fine line that you see in the spectrum, each spectral line that you see in a spectrum of a particular element, that is hydrogen atom, that line itself has many finer lines embedded in it. Each line has many finer lines embedded in it, and these spectral lines, when they are exposed to either magnetic or electric field, they split into those finer lines. That is known as splitting of the spectral lines. Now, this could not be explained by the Bohr's atomic theory, and the splitting of the spectral lines in the presence of the magnetic field is known as the Siemens effect. The splitting of the spectral line in the presence of the electric field is known as the Stark effect. So the splitting of the spectral lines in the presence of magnetic and electric field, that is the two effects, the Siemens and the Stark effect, could not be explained by Bohr. And the third and the most important contradiction to Bohr's theory came up when a scientist known as Heisenberg proposed his uncertainty principle. When he gave his uncertainty principle, which is a very, very well studied and established principle, that is Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, gave the biggest contribution to the contradiction, that is contradiction to the Bohr's theory. And now, before talking about how the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle contradicted the Bohr's theory, I will explain you what is the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Students, you know uncertainty. When I was talking about the concepts of chemistry, I had talked about uncertainty in measurement, errors in measurement, right? So this uncertainty principle states that it is impossible to determine exactly the position and momentum. We are talking about the position and momentum of an electron simultaneously. So according to Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, it is stated that the exact position and momentum of a particle electron cannot be determined simultaneously, and for this he gave us this expression also. Let us understand this expression. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is stated by this mathematical expression, that is delta x into delta p is greater than or equal to h upon 4 pi. Now let me just explain you what's it understand. If x is the position of the particle and p is the momentum, then delta x can taken in this equation is the uncertainty or the error in position, uncertainty in the measurement of the position, and delta m is the uncertainty in momentum. So here delta x is uncertainty in the position or the error in position, delta p is the error in momentum, and when these two are multiplied you get a value greater than or equal to h upon 4 pi. Please look at this expression over here. H is the Planck's constant 4 and pi 22 upon 7. This is a constant. Alright. Now it was said that the uncertainty in position and measurement should have a positive value. h upon 4 pi. It has a positive value which is equal to h upon 4 pi or greater than h upon 4 pi. Now look at this second expression. So this expression is the mathematical expression for Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Now look at this expression. Delta x into m delta Vx is greater than or equal to h upon 4 pi. It is nothing. From where has this come here? It has just been replaced by the formula for the momentum. We know that P is equal to mv. Now m is going to remain constant for the particle that is in question, that is, so I take m, not delta m, because m is going to be constant. The velocity is going to change, that is I have taken delta Vx, that is the velocity of the particle. So simply delta P can be replaced or substituted like m delta Vx, and the expression becomes delta x into m delta Vx greater than or equal to h upon 4 pi. Please learn this up, it is extremely important. The principle is very, very commonly asked in your exams. Now, how does this Heisenberg's uncertainty principle explain or contradict Bohr's atomic theory? See, from this expression we can say that delta x into delta Vx. I have taken delta Vx over here and I have brought m to this side, that is h upon 4 pi m. Now, if you remember, in Bohr's atomic theory, we had Bohr had proposed exact value for the radius of a shell. You know that Rn, that is the radius for an nth shell, was given by 0.53 z square upon n. Yes, and for similarly n square upon z, this is z, and please make this correction over here, this is z. And then the velocity also, he gave an exact value for the velocity, that is 2.18 into 10 to the power 6 into z upon n. So in his postulates, when he was proposing the theory, he could exactly measure the position also and exactly measure the velocity also, which means there was zero uncertainty in the measurements, in these two measurements. There was zero uncertainty, zero error, which is not possible because Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is very, very well and largely explained for most of the particles around. It is a very well established principle, and it has been established through a lot of intensive experimentation. So because this principle has been established through experimental data, and Bohr had given the values for exact position and exact velocity, which were indicating a zero uncertainty, which is not possible, and hence when Heisenberg's uncertainty principle came up, it gave a contradiction to Bohr's theory, because the position and the momentum or the velocity of a moving particle cannot be measured simultaneously. So this is all about the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Now I will continue in my next video. Students, please view the video very carefully. These are all very, very important concepts. For sure they are going to be questioned about these concepts in your, either whether they are your assessments, whether they are your unit tests, half-yearly examinations, and leave aside these examinations, the annual examination, the competitive exams that you are going to appear for after class 12. So please view these videos. In case of any doubt, feel free to send your messages. I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you so much.